I never thought I'd see the day when my in-laws outright told me that my children weren't welcome in their home. But there I was, standing in my kitchen, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, as my mother-in-law, Linda, delivered the final cutting blow. This year, we're keeping Thanksgiving a little more intimate, she said, her voice dripping with the false sweetness she always used when trying to sound reasonable. Just adults, something peaceful. I forced a smile, though she couldn't see me. Oh, so no kids at all? There was a pause. Too long of a pause. Oh, no, not exactly. The cold feeling in my stomach told me what was coming before she even said the words. Daniel and Sophie are bringing their boys, of course, Linda added, her tone light, casual, as if she hadn't just driven a dagger between my ribs. But you know how well-behaved they are. It's just easier this way. There it was, the truth, laid bare. My children, Emma Lucas, weren't good enough for their table. My brother-in-law's sons, however, were acceptable, refined, worthy. I felt something inside me snap, a deep wound that had been festering for years finally breaking open. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was about every moment of favoritism, every passive-aggressive comment, every whispered remark about how my kids were spirited while Daniel's boys were polite. It was about the way my in-laws had always treated Daniel like the golden child, his wife like a prize, and their children like the future heirs to a legacy, while my family was little more than an afterthought. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay calm. So just to be clear, my kids aren't invited, but Daniel's are? Linda exhaled sharply, like I was the one being difficult. Oh, Mia, don't be dramatic. It's just one meal. You and Ethan are still welcome, of course. That was the moment I knew I was done. I had spent years trying to fit into this family, bending over backward to be accepted, ignoring the blatant favoritism for the sake of keeping the peace. But this was the last straw. I tightened my grip on the phone. If my kids aren't welcome, neither am I. A silence stretched between us. I imagined Linda standing in her pristine, perfectly decorated kitchen, holding her expensive wine glass, eyes narrowing at my refusal to comply. She had expected me to cave, to agree, to drop my kids off with the sitter like they were a burden, while I sat at their table pretending everything was fine. When she finally spoke, her voice was clipped, irritated. Suit yourself. And then she hung up. I stood frozen, the phone still in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. From the living room, the sound of giggles drifted in. Emma and Lucas, playing on the floor, completely unaware that their grandparents had just cast them aside like they were nothing. My beautiful, loving, amazing children who had never done anything to deserve this. The injustice of it burned inside me like a wildfire. I had spent years trying to earn the approval of people who had no intention of ever giving it. I had smiled through gritted teeth at their backhanded compliments, endured the constant comparisons to Daniel's perfect little family, and played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law, hoping that someday they would see my worth. But they never would. I inhaled deeply, forcing the anger down. This wasn't just about me. This was about my children, and I refused to let them feel unwanted. Ethan walked into the kitchen then, rubbing his eyes, fresh from his afternoon nap. Who was that? I turned to him slowly, the words thick in my throat. Your mother. She uninvited our kids from Thanksgiving. Ethan blinked, still groggy. Wait, what? They don't want our kids there, I said, my voice sharper now. But Daniel's kids? Oh, they're more than welcome. His face paled. She actually said that? I nodded, watching as he processed the information. I could see the internal conflict in his eyes. The years of loyalty to his parents, the deep-seated belief that families should stick together, warring with the undeniable truth that his own mother had just insulted our children. Mia, He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to be in the middle of this. I let out a bitter laugh. You are in the middle of this, Ethan, and you need to decide where you stand. His silence told me everything. I didn't need his permission to do what had to be done. Turning on my heel, I walked toward the living room where my babies were still lost in their innocent world, building a castle out of pillows and laughing like nothing was wrong. But I knew better. I knelt down beside them, pulling them both into my arms, breathing in the warmth of their little bodies. Hey, sweethearts, I murmured, pressing a kiss to Lucas's forehead. How do you feel about having our own Thanksgiving this year? Emma gasped, eyes wide with excitement. Like, with just us? Just us, I confirmed, my heart swelling. And we can do whatever we want. Pancakes instead of turkey, ice cream for dessert, no rules. Lucas clapped his hands, best Thanksgiving ever. And just like that, the sadness melted away. Linda had made her choice, and now I was making mine.
This year, I wasn't going to spend Thanksgiving in a house that didn't want my family. I was going to spend it celebrating the people who mattered. And my in-laws, they were about to find out exactly what it meant to lose me.
I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years, but the relief was short-lived. My phone was already buzzing before I even got out of bed. I ignored the first few notifications, letting them pile up as I stretched and took my time getting ready. But when the 10th buzz came through in a row, I finally glanced at the screen. Daniel. I sighed. Of course, he had been dragged into this. My brother-in-law never missed an opportunity to play the family peacemaker, which conveniently always meant telling me to apologize and fall in line while never holding his parents accountable for anything. I hesitated before opening the message. Your mom told me what happened. Seriously, Mia? Did you have to make such a big deal out of this? I let out a humorless laugh. A big deal, right? So it was me overreacting, not Linda blatantly telling me my children weren't good enough for their Thanksgiving table. I typed back quickly, my fingers moving furiously over the screen. Me. Your mother uninvited my kids, Daniel. She made it clear they aren't welcome, but your kids are, and that's okay with you? The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. A long pause stretched before his reply came through. Daniel, she didn't mean it like that. You know how she is. She just wants a peaceful dinner. And let's be honest, your kids can be a lot. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. There it was. The same tired excuse, the same condescending justification. Your kids are too loud, too wild, too much. As if my children were nothing more than an inconvenience, as if their existence had to be smoothed out to accommodate Linda's perfect image of a family gathering. Me. You mean they act like normal kids? Daniel, look, I'm just saying maybe you're being too sensitive about this. It's one dinner, Mia. Mom said you and Ethan are still invited. Just come and leave the kids with a sitter. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I inhaled sharply, closing my eyes for a moment. If I let this go, it would never end. Linda would keep pushing, keep drawing the line further and further, deciding which parts of my life were acceptable and which ones weren't. And I was done playing along. Me. If my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I. I pressed send and blocked his number before he could argue. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected, but instead of the usual stress and anxiety that came with trying to impress my in-laws, the day was filled with laughter and warmth. Ethan and I cooked together in the kitchen, making a meal that was nothing like the traditional feast at his parents' house. There was no overcooked turkey or fancy place settings. Just pancakes stacked high, whipped cream in bowls, and homemade milkshakes that the kids insisted on drinking straight from the blender. Emma and Lucas ran around in their pajamas, faces sticky with syrup, their giggles bouncing off the walls, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't feel like I had to measure every word or every move to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. It was perfect. But I should have known the peace wouldn't last. Around mid-afternoon, as we were settling in to watch movies, Ethan's phone rang. He hesitated when he saw the screen. It's my mom, he said, glancing at me. I rolled my eyes. Of course it is. He sighed, rubbing his temple. I should probably answer, right? It depends, I said, crossing my arms. Are you in the mood to hear about how I ruined Thanksgiving? He hesitated before hitting accept. Hey, Mom. Even from where I sat, I could hear her voice, high-pitched, slightly shrill, laced with the barely concealed irritation she always had when things didn't go her way. Evan, where are you? His jaw tensed. At home? At home? What do you mean at home? It's Thanksgiving. I watched his fingers drum against the couch, his posture stiff. Yeah, well, Mia and I decided to do our own thing this year. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. So she convinced you to stay away. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, his grip on the phone tightening. Mom. No, Ethan, this is ridiculous. She is being selfish. And now you're choosing her over us? I snorted, shaking my head. Ah, there it was. The manipulation, the guilt tripping. Ethan exhaled slowly. Mom, I'm not doing this with you right now. Do you even understand what you've done? We are sitting here having Thanksgiving without our son. And why? Because your wife threw a tantrum. My patience snapped. I grabbed the phone straight out of Ethan's hand and pressed it to my ear. You mean because you uninvited my children? I said, my voice ice cold. There was a pause on the other end as if she hadn't expected me to take the call. Mia, she said, her tone immediately shifting into that false, condescending sweetness. I don't see why you have to make this so difficult. We love Emma and Lucas, but you have to admit they can be energetic. We just wanted a peaceful evening, that's all. I let out a slow, measured breath, my fingers curling tighter around the phone. No, Linda, you wanted to make it clear that Daniel's children matter more than mine. That's what this is really about, isn't it? It is not what I said. You didn't have to. She sighed dramatically. Mia, we're family. I really think you should apologize for making such a big deal out of this. If you do, we can just move on and forget this ever happened. I almost laughed. An apology from me? I had spent years apologizing, years shrinking myself down to be acceptable, to be good enough for their family. I had bent over backward to make things work, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict. And where had that gotten me? Kicked out of Thanksgiving while my children sat at home, wondering why they weren't good enough. I wasn't doing it anymore. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. You're right, Linda. We are family. Exactly. And that's why I won't apologize, because family shouldn't treat each other like this. But I get it now. You don't see me or my kids as real family. Mia, don't be childish. No, I cut her off, my voice like steel. You made your choice, Linda. Now I'm making mine. I'm done. And then, without waiting for another word, I ended the call. Ethan let out a long breath. So, that went well. I turned to him, my heart still pounding. I'm done chasing their approval, I said firmly. They wanted to cut us out, fine. They just don't realize how much they're about to lose. And I meant it. Because this wasn't just about one holiday. This was a line drawn in the sand. And my in-laws were about to learn exactly what it meant to push me too far. For the first time in years, I thought that maybe, just maybe, my in-laws had finally gotten the message. After that disastrous phone call with Linda, I half expected another flurry of texts, another attempt to guilt trip Ethan or wear me down. But the silence that followed was almost eerie. A full week passed without a single call from them, not even a passive-aggressive text disguised as concern. It was strange, unsettling even, like the calm before a storm. And I should have known it was the calm before the storm. It was the first Saturday of December when the next strike came. Ethan and I had taken Emma and Lucas to pick out a Christmas tree, our little family bundled up in scarves and mittens as we wandered through the rows of evergreens. The kids ran ahead, giggling as they searched for the perfect one. It was the kind of day I had always dreamed of, the kind that made me forget all the stress and tension from the past few weeks. Then my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, I knew better by now, but when I saw the caller ID, my stomach dropped. Daniel. I sighed, stepping away from Ethan and the kids before swiping to answer. What do you want, Daniel? His voice came through sharp and clipped. Are you seriously going through with this? I frowned. Going through with what, exactly? He scoffed. Mom just called me in tears, Mia. She says you're shutting them out of your lives completely, that you're planning to cut them off for good. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, so now she's the victim? I'm not shutting them out, I said evenly. I'm enforcing boundaries. There's a difference. Daniel didn't seem to hear me. Mia, come on. They're our parents. You really think you can just erase them from your life? I bristled. I don't need to erase them, Daniel. They're doing a pretty good job of that themselves. Maybe you should ask Mom why she thought it was okay to treat my kids like they don't matter. He sighed loudly. It was one dinner. Daniel, it was never just one dinner. My voice shook with restrained anger as I continued. It was years of favoritism, years of making it clear that you and your kids mattered more, years of dismissing me, talking down to me, pretending I was part of this family while treating me like I was just some outsider. Thanksgiving was just the final straw. Daniel was silent for a beat, but then his voice dropped to something lower, something more urgent. Look, Mia, you have to understand something. Mom and Dad aren't just going to let this go. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What's that supposed to mean? Another pause, then just don't be surprised if they take things further. I gripped the phone tighter. Daniel, are they planning something? Yeah, I'm just saying. But before he could finish, I heard Linda's voice in the background. Daniel, are you still talking to her? Hang up. She made her decision. She can live with it. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, a cold, creeping unease settling into my bones. Linda's voice had been sharp, final, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Whatever she was planning, I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. It wasn't until the following Monday that I realized just how far she was willing to go. It started with a phone call from Ethan while I was at work. I picked up immediately when I saw his name. Hey, everything okay? There was a long pause. Then he said, "You're not going to believe this." I stiffened. What happened? He exhaled sharply. Mom and Dad, they tried to pull Emma and Lucas from school. My blood ran cold. Quiet. I could hear the strain in Ethan's voice as he explained. The school called me this morning. Apparently, Mom and Dad went there, claiming they were there to pick up the kids early. They told the front office we had an emergency and that they were supposed to take them home. My breath caught in my throat. The what? The receptionist thought it was weird and called me to confirm. When I said no, they weren't authorized to take them, the school refused to let them in. I felt my hands start to shake. My in-laws had gone behind our backs. They had tried to take my children, thinking they could just walk into their school and whisk them away. The audacity, the entitlement. I was already grabbing my car keys before Ethan even finished speaking. I'm going over there. Yeah. But I wasn't listening. My vision was red. This was it. This was the breaking point. By the time I arrived at my in-laws' house, I was barely containing my fury. I didn't even bother knocking. I pounded on the door, hard enough that I knew Linda would hear it from anywhere in the house. Seconds later, she answered, her expression perfectly neutral, like she wasn't the woman who had just attempted to steal my children. She tilted her head. Oh, Mia, what a surprise. I shoved past her, stepping into the entryway. You tried to take my kids. Linda sighed dramatically, shutting the door behind me. Don't be so dramatic, dear. We were simply... Don't patronize me, my voice came out deadly calm. You went behind my back. You went behind Ethan's back. You lied to the school and tried to take them. What the hell were you thinking? Linda pursed her lips. We were concerned, Mia. You were making rash, emotional decisions. We thought it would be best if the kids spent some time with family. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, now they're family? Now they matter? When just weeks ago you told me they weren't welcome at your table. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Mia, you are being unreasonable. I stepped closer, my voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. If you ever try something like this again, I swear to God, I will make sure you never see them again. Do you understand me? Her eyes widened. Mia, don't be ridiculous. You can't just... I can and I will. My voice was ice cold. You wanted to draw a line? Congratulations. You just made it permanent. Linda stood there stunned, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for some way to regain control, but it was too late. She had lost. I turned on my heel and walked to the door. Right before I stepped out, I glanced over my shoulder. Merry Christmas, Linda. And then I left, slamming the door behind me. As I drove away, my heart pounded in my chest. I had no doubt Linda would try again, but next time, I'd be ready. I thought the worst was over. After storming out of my in-laws' house, I felt certain I had made my point. Linda had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and I had let her know in no uncertain terms that she would never see my children again if she pulled another stunt like that. I had expected backlash, anger, maybe a flurry of messages trying to guilt trip Ethan and me, but for the second time, there was silence. And that terrified me more than anything. Linda wasn't the kind of woman to take defeat gracefully. She had spent her entire life controlling people, bending situations to her will. If she wasn't fighting back, it meant she was waiting, and that was worse. Much worse. I was right. A week later, Ethan came home from work, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he was holding back a scream. I was in the kitchen, setting the table for dinner, when I saw him standing in the doorway, unmoving. Something was wrong. I put the plates down slowly. Ethan? He didn't answer at first. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable, before finally exhaling and rubbing a hand down his face. "Oh, Mia," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're not going to believe this." My stomach clenched. What happened? He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face me. I stared. It was an email from Child Protective Services, a formal notification that a complaint had been filed against me, against us, accusing us of neglect. My vision blurred as I scanned the words, my pulse roaring in my ears. Allegations of emotional instability, of creating a toxic home environment, of keeping the children isolated from their extended family in a way that was concerning. I couldn't breathe. I looked up at Ethan, my hands shaking. "Who?" But I already knew. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. "It was my mother." I slammed the phone down on the counter. "That witch," my voice shook with fury. "She actually called CPS on us." Ethan nodded slowly, his fist clenched. "She did more than that, Mia." He hesitated, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. I called Daniel. I stared at him. Why? I needed to hear it from him, he admitted. I needed to know if he was involved. I braced myself, and Ethan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. He didn't even try to deny it. He said they were just concerned and that Mom thought we were being too extreme by keeping the kids away. My whole body was trembling. "We need to try to get our kids taken from us." Ethan's expression darkened. I don't think she ever expected them to actually be removed. She just wanted to scare us, to make us panic, to force us to come crawling back. My stomach churned. Linda had played games before, manipulation, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, but this was a whole new level of evil. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. What do we do? Ethan was already steps ahead. I called CPS immediately. They haven't officially opened an investigation yet. It's just a preliminary complaint, which means they have to do an initial review first. I exhaled shakily. That was something, at least. But still, the fact that she had gone this far, that she had been willing to use the system to try to force us into submission. I had been furious before. Now I was out for blood. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with every possible scenario. Would CPS show up at our door? Would they interview Emma and Lucas? Would they put our names in some kind of record? I had done nothing wrong. I was a good mother, and yet one phone call from Linda had put my entire life under scrutiny. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done playing defense. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called someone I never thought I would need, a lawyer. A calm, professional voice answered, "This is Ava Grant. How can I help you?" I tightened my grip on the phone. "I need legal advice," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "My mother-in-law just filed a false CPS report against me." There was a brief pause, then, "I see. Tell me everything." And I did. I told her everything. About the years of favoritism, the Thanksgiving disaster, the incident at the school, and now the false CPS claim. When I finished, Ava let out a low whistle. "That's quite a mess. Tell me about it." She was silent for a moment, then she said, "You have two options. One, you wait this out. CPS will likely dismiss it quickly if there's no evidence, but that means dealing with the stress of it hanging over your head." I gritted my teeth. "And option two? You go on the offensive." I sat up straighter. Meaning? File a restraining order? Send a cease and desist? Make it clear that if they continue to harass you, there will be legal consequences. I clenched my jaw. Let's do it. Ava sounded impressed. You're not messing around, are you? No, I said coldly. I'm not. That afternoon, I sent Linda and Daniel a message. Me, since you've decided to escalate things, I've retained legal counsel. Any further attempts to interfere with my family will be met with legal action. Consider this your final warning. No response. But an hour later, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, Linda's voice crackled through the speaker, filled with barely contained rage. Mia, you've really lost it now. A lawyer, you're tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. You think you can threaten us? You think you can keep the kids away forever? You'll regret this. I smiled because she was scared, and that meant I was winning. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. This was war, and I was going to make sure Linda never came near my children again. I had always thought that the worst thing someone could do was betray you, but I was wrong. The worst thing wasn't betrayal. It was watching someone double down on their cruelty, knowing full well they were hurting you and doing it anyway. That was exactly what Linda did. I had expected retaliation after sending that message, but I wasn't prepared for how far she was willing to go. 3 days after I filed the cease and desist, Ethan and I received a formal notice in the mail. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. What is? Ethan asked, stepping closer. I stared at the letter, barely able to process the words. Linda had officially filed for grandparents' rights. My head spun. I had heard of cases like this before, where toxic, controlling family members used the court system to force their way back into their grandchildren's lives. But this wasn't just a desperate ploy anymore. This was an all-out war. Ethan snatched the letter from my hands, his face darkening as he read. This can't be real, he muttered. She has no case. No case. I swallowed hard. She doesn't need a case, Ethan, I whispered. She just needs to make our lives a living hell. I had seen it before. Parents dragged into months, even years of legal battles, lawyers' fees piling up, the endless emotional strain, the way the system could be manipulated by people with just enough money and just enough vindictiveness. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. She wants to drag us through hell. Ethan ran a hand down his face. We'll fight it, he said, his voice firm. We'll fight it with everything we have. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I had spent my entire life trying to be the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the one who always bit her tongue and let things slide because that was what good daughters and good daughters-in-law did. But Linda had pushed me too far. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Emma and Lucas. I refused to let them grow up thinking it was okay to be treated like second-class family members. I refused to let them see me back down, to let them think it was normal for people like Linda to dictate their worth. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I want to file a restraining order, I said the second Ava picked up. She exhaled sharply. I was hoping you'd say that. 2 weeks pass. Linda didn't back down. She doubled down. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that she was painting herself as the victim to everyone who would listen. She's telling people you're keeping the kids from her out of spite, Ava told me. That she's just a poor, loving grandmother who's been cut off for no reason. I laughed bitterly. Of course she is. The worst part, people believed her. Somehow, in this twisted game, she had managed to convince others that she was the wounded party, that I was being cruel. But she wasn't expecting me to fight back. The cease and desist turned into a full-blown legal battle. I wasn't just defending myself. I was preparing to go on the offensive. I had kept records of everything. Every snide comment, every passive-aggressive text, every time she excluded my children in favor of Daniel's, I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. Ethan stood beside me every step of the way. We're in this together, he told me one night as we sat at the dining table buried under legal documents, no matter how ugly it gets. I squeezed his hand, I know. I had no idea just how ugly it would get. A week before our first court hearing, I received an anonymous tip. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Hello." Pause. Then a woman's voice, low, hesitant. "Mia." I frowned. "Who is this?" A deep breath. Then my stomach twisted. Sophie, Daniel's wife. I hadn't spoken to her since everything blew up. "What do you want?" I asked, wary. Another pause. Then, "I think you need to know something." I felt a chill race down my spine. What? Sophie hesitated, then exhaled. "Linda's been bragging about something," she said quietly. "Something about planting evidence." I went cold. "The evidence?" I echoed. "What kind of evidence?" "I don't know," she admitted. She just kept saying she needed to build a case, that she had something big planned. I gripped my phone tighter. "Sophie, if you know anything." "I don't," she cut in quickly. "But I needed to warn you. She hesitated. "I don't agree with what she's doing." My mind was already spinning. Linda was planning something that could destroy me. I couldn't let that happen. The night before the court hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my heart racing, my mind running through 1,000 worst-case scenarios. What if she had something? What if she managed to convince the court that I was unfit? What if... Ethan reached for my hand in the dark. "Mia," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "We're going to win." I swallowed hard. I don't know. He turned toward me, squeezing my fingers. "Yes," he said firmly, "we will." I wanted to believe him, but I had a feeling that Linda's final move would be her most dangerous yet. And I had no idea if I was ready for it. The courtroom was colder than I expected, or maybe that was just me. Maybe it was the way every nerve in my body felt on edge, waiting for Linda's final attack. I sat beside Ethan, my hands gripping the edge of the table, my nails digging into the wood. Across the room, Linda sat with her lawyer, her expression carefully schooled into one of wounded dignity. She looked every bit the wronged grandmother, dressed in soft pastels, a delicate handkerchief in her lap as if she might cry at any moment. If I didn't know better, I might have believed she was a kind, loving woman who had just been unfairly cut off from her grandchildren. But I knew better. Judge Howard, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, glanced over the papers in front of her before speaking. "Let's get to the heart of the matter," she said, her voice brisk. "Mrs. Carter, you're requesting court-mandated visitation with your grandchildren, correct?" Linda nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I have been unfairly prevented from seeing them, despite having a deep and loving bond with them." I scoffed before I could stop myself. Judge Howard glanced at me. "Mrs. Taylor, you'll get your chance to speak." I nodded, biting my tongue, but Ethan placed a steadying hand on my knee under the table. Linda's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has been an active and loving part of her grandchildren's lives since birth. She has provided financial support, emotional care, and a stable family presence. The sudden and complete separation has caused significant emotional distress, not just for my client, but for the children as well." Ethan tensed beside me. Stable presence, financial support, that was an outright lie. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Then Linda turned to the judge, her lips trembling, theatrics. "Your Honor, I don't know why Mia has done this," she whispered. "I've only ever tried to be there for her and the children, but she's always been sensitive, unstable even." I froze. There it was. Her final move. She wasn't just painting herself as the victim, she was trying to frame me as an unfit mother. Judge Howard's gaze sharpened. "Mrs. Carter, are you suggesting that Mrs. Taylor is unfit to care for her children?" Linda hesitated for half a second before nodding solemnly. "I don't want to say anything unkind, Your Honor, but I do have concerns." A chill crawled down my spine. I knew this wasn't just some baseless accusation. Linda wouldn't have come unprepared. Her lawyer stood again. Your Honor, my client has obtained evidence that raises serious concerns about the children's well-being. I felt my heart stop. Evidence? What evidence? Then he reached into a folder and held up a series of printed photographs. I leaned forward, trying to see, and suddenly the blood in my veins turned to ice. The photos were of my house, the front yard, the driveway, the backyard, but something was wrong. In each picture, things looked disheveled, trash scattered, a window cracked, and then the worst one. A picture of Emma and Lucas playing outside with a man I didn't recognize. I gasped. What? Linda's lawyer set the photos down carefully in front of the judge. Your Honor, these were taken by a private investigator hired by my client. She was concerned about her grandchildren's safety, and it appears those concerns were well founded. I shot up from my chair. This is insane. That man? Who is that man? Linda sighed, shaking her head as if she were heartbroken by my outburst. Mia, sweetie, she said, fake concern dripping from every word. I tried to talk to you about this. You keep company with questionable people. You let strangers near the children. I was only trying to protect them. I could barely breathe. This was a setup, a full-scale attack. Ugh. Your Honor, Ava, my lawyer, stood, her voice calm and commanding. We were not informed of these photos before today, which is a direct violation of court procedure. Furthermore, my client has no knowledge of the man in these images. I turned to Ethan, panic rising in my chest. I don't know who that is. His jaw was tight. I know. Judge Howard flipped through the photos, her face unreadable. Mr. Carter, she said, addressing Linda's lawyer, this is a serious accusation. Do you have any proof connecting this stranger to Mrs. Taylor? Linda's lawyer hesitated. Not directly, Your Honor, but... Then this is pure speculation, Ava cut in. Mrs. Carter hired someone to stalk my client's home, take misleading photographs, and present them as evidence of neglect. That alone raises ethical concerns. Judge Howard turned to Linda, her sharp gaze piercing. Mrs. Carter, did you hire a private investigator to monitor your daughter-in-law's home? Linda hesitated just a fraction too long. Then she pressed a hand to her chest. I only did what any concerned grandparent would do. Your Honor. That was the moment I knew she had lost. Judge Howard's expression hardened. The court does not take kindly to manipulation, Mrs. Carter. This is a gross invasion of privacy. Your request for visitation is denied. Linda's face drained of color. What? No, Your Honor, please. You don't understand. But the judge had already turned to me. Mrs. Taylor, you are well within your rights to pursue further legal action regarding this harassment. Linda's mouth snapped shut. I took a shaky breath, the weight of it all crashing down on me, the lies, the threats, the invasion of my family's privacy, and finally it was over. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. We won, he whispered. And for the first time in months, I let myself believe it. Linda didn't speak to us again after that. Daniel tried to reach out once, sending a stiff, half-hearted apology text, but I ignored it. I didn't owe him anything. It took time to heal. For weeks, I still felt the ghost of Linda's presence lurking in my life, the paranoia that she might come back, that she might try something else, but she didn't. And one quiet afternoon, as I watched Emma and Lucas play in the backyard, free, happy, safe, I realized something. Linda had spent years trying to convince me that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't strong enough to stand without her approval. But in the end, I didn't just survive without her. I thrived. Looking back, I realized that true strength isn't about fighting battles to earn someone's approval. It's about knowing when to walk away. Linda thought she had all the power, that she could manipulate guilt and control me into submission. But what she never understood was that the real power wasn't in her hands. It was in mine all along. For years, I let myself believe that family was something you had to endure, no matter how much they hurt you. That obligation was more important than self-respect. But I was wrong. Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who love you without conditions, the people who stand by you not because they want something from you, but because they truly care. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go of the people who don't deserve a place in your life, who don't. Linda's manipulation, the lies, the legal threats, they were all meant to break me, to make me come crawling back. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything, not just access to my children, but the illusion of control she had spent years crafting. And me, I walked away with everything that truly mattered: my family, my peace, and my freedom. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member? Have you experienced betrayal that forced you to choose between your dignity and your past? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your stories. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life betrayals, shocking twists, and stories of justice being served, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Betrayal in the End, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Because remember, sometimes walking away isn't losing, it's winning.